Welcome, my friends! In this video, we will discuss two methods of specifying particular numbers on the number line. The first technique is what is called set builder notation, and the second is called interval notation. Let's start with set builder notation. Let's say we want to specify the interval on the number line between 1 and 6. I have included a closed circle at both 1 and 6 to indicate that the values 1 and 6 are included in my interval. If we want to specify this interval using set builder notation, we always start with an open bracket. And then we write our variable, which is almost always x. Then we write a vertical line, which means such that. Basically, we are saying that the values of x are allowed such that, and then after the vertical line, we will specify exactly which values for x are allowed. In this case, the numbers between 1 and 6 inclusive are allowed. The way we specify this is by writing a 1, a less than or equal to sign, our variable, which is x, another less than or equal to sign, and then the 6. Finally, we close the right bracket. The inside part is just a fancy way of saying that x is between 1 and 6, including 1 and 6. The first part says that 1 is less than or equal to x, which is the same thing as saying that x is greater than or equal to 1. The second part says that x is less than or equal to 6. Altogether, we have the statement that x is somewhere between 1 and 6 inclusive, meaning the values 1 and 6 are both allowed in our interval. This is the set builder technique of specifying a range of values for x. Interval notation is the second way that a range of values can be specified. For interval notation, you write the lower and the upper bound of your interval, separated by commas. In this case, 1 and 6. Then you either close off each value with parentheses or a square bracket, depending on if the value is included in the interval or not. You should use a square bracket when the value is included in the interval, such as when we have a closed circle on the number line. You should use parentheses when the value is not included in the interval, such as when we have an open circle on the number line. In our example, both the 1 and the 6 are included in the interval, so we can use brackets on both values. And that's it! This specifies that the numbers between 1 and 6 are allowed, and since we use square brackets, we know that both 1 and 6 are included in the interval. Let's take a look at this example. We have the values ranging from -2 to 4 on the number line, but -2 has an open circle, indicating that -2 is not part of the interval. 4 has a closed circle, indicating that 4 is part of the interval. For set builder notation, we have x such that x is between -2 and 4. But we have a less than sign instead of a less than or equal to sign on the -2, because -2 is not included in the interval. For interval notation, we range from -2 to 4, so we have both of those values separated by commas. Since we are not including the -2, we use parentheses on this value. And since we are including the 4, we will use a square bracket. Sometimes you might want to specify an unbounded interval using either set builder or interval notation. By unbounded, I mean that the interval starts at a real number on the number line and then either increases forever towards positive infinity or decreases forever towards negative infinity. For example, this interval ranges from 3 to positive infinity and includes the number 3, indicated by the closed circle. In set builder notation, this is very simple to express. Since all values that are 3 or larger are allowed, we write x such that x is greater than or equal to 3. We no longer need the compound inequality with two inequality signs when we have an unbounded interval like this one. For interval notation, we have to do something slightly different. Typically, we write the two numbers that we are bounded between, separated by commas. In this case, the lower bound is 3, but there is no upper bound. The interval goes forever to positive infinity. So we write just that, 3, positive infinity. We use a square bracket on the 3 to indicate that 3 is part of the interval. As for the infinity, you may be tempted to include a square bracket there as well, thinking that we include positive infinity in our interval. That's the same thing I thought too when I was first learning interval notation, but the convention is to always close off infinity with parentheses, not brackets. The reasoning is, since infinity is not technically a number, it doesn't really make sense to include it in our interval. Remember to always close off infinity with parentheses, and never with a square bracket, when specifying a range of values using interval notation. Note that in some situations, you may need to express negative infinity for an interval that is unbounded towards the negative values. The same convention applies. Always close off infinities, whether they be positive or negative, with parentheses. Alright my friends, that wraps up my video relating to set builder and interval notation.